Let's start and talk a little bit about high-performing IT organizations and what they have in common. So based on a Puppet Labs 2014-2015 State of DevOps report, which was actually based on responses from 20,000 different technical professionals, these high-performing IT organizations really have three things in common. First of all, they're more agile. Teams are beginning to innovate faster than ever, and like Dick was mentioning, the cloud-based stuff, and folks are deploying 30 times more frequently with up to 200 shorter lead times. And these high-performing organizations are also more reliable. By streamlining their processes and fortifying infrastructure, these high-performing teams have 60 times fewer failures and can recover up to 168 times faster. And third, they're just winning. Teams that practice DevOps typically exceed profitability and market share and productivity goals. So let's talk a little bit about today's situation. So we know that we live in an interconnected world that's really quickly changing all the time. And businesses have multiple tools they use for productivity and communication and different kinds of work. And of course, there's new tools that are popping up every day. Now, those businesses want innovation and new technologies and frequent updates to support their competitiveness and rapidly changing business requirements. But at the same time, they also want all of their services to be completely stable and completely reliable. And as we all know, change is really the nemesis of stability. So the more you change something, the more likely it is you're going to break it. In fact, according to Gartner, 80% of all incidents are really caused by failed changes. And the thing is here, who's expected to deliver these really reliable services? Well, it's those development teams that are the ones that are creating change. So that's where the trouble comes in. So agile and lean methodologies have begun to change the way we develop software as far back as the early 2000s. And ever since, developers have been tasked with delivering features faster and more frequently, while IT operations and support have to maintain infrastructure stability and availability. And customers are going to want both, and that's where that conflict lies. So to achieve a balance there, we need to change the way that we handle change. So in IT organizations that are tasked with balancing in business expectations, and they're also supposed to keep everything running, and within those IT organizations, specific support teams face several different challenges of their own. There's always a continued pressure to improve the relevance of their service to the business. IT's got to balance the rate of change with stability to be sure that business value is going to continually be provided. We have to look at scattered data or maybe lack of information at all levels can be limiting incident and problem understanding. Deployment failures have a high risk of downtime. And all too often, really, those because of a lack of communication between teams, those changes that are made by IT support doesn't even know about. So that all can cause problems. There's duplication of work and redundancies and gaps in knowledge and a need to hand off between teams, and all of that results in higher IT and business costs. And the feedback from support, which often really well represents the customer and their interest, often even doesn't get communicated to and from the people that need it, like development and product owners and project managers. Pardon me. So ultimately what we find is that collaboration is going to be the key to success. Now, IT teams, support teams are responsible for customer interactions, and of course, success depends on the stability and quality of those services. And it's really too often the case that development and support teams end up having different goals, different methodologies, and even work in different management systems. And over time, they become siloed, and there's a lack of collaboration, which causes problems through miscommunication and a lack of shared knowledge. So how do we begin to break down those silos and start to improve communication and really drive towards higher business value? Well, IT support and development teams need to start working together. And of course, with all the other IT functions, with development, operations, QA, support, testing, everybody. And the DevOps movement was really a response by those dev groups to this very conflict. And it really aims to bring these two sides of the house together. IT support needs to understand and adopt these agile and lean and Kanban principles that were developed under DevOps so that they can continue to support both IT and business services that way. So what is DevOps? Well, let's dive in and find out. DevOps ultimately advocates for a collaborative working relationship between development and IT operations, where historically they've been separated and even siloed. Development refers to teams that develop and maintain software products and services. So today we'll focus on like internal developers maintaining the systems and tools that employees might use to be productive, such as purchasing systems and CRMs and that sort of thing. But this really applies to any dev teams. And operations then refers to those teams that focus on delivering and managing and supporting products and services. And again, today for our purposes, I'll be sort of referring to IT teams that support internal systems that employees use. But again, these principles are applicable everywhere. And companies like Netflix that Dick mentioned, and Amazon and Google are all applying these DevOps principles and practices to be sure that they can release faster and maintain a high quality of services. So these DevOps, well, what is it about? Well, Patrick Dubois, the creator of the term DevOps, mentioned in his blog that DevOps is not about a technology. I think a lot of us get stumped on that. But DevOps is not about a technology. DevOps is about a business problem. And really the best way to understand DevOps is really distilling it into the three principles we have here that were first popularized by the Phoenix Project by Gene Kim. So the first way is around systems thinking, and the second way around feedback loops, and the third around continual experimentation and learning. So that first way around systems thinking, when you begin to cultivate a collaborative culture between development and support teams, you end up shortening the feedback loop that's necessary to drive that business agility we've been talking about. So the functions of a collaborative culture are really explained by the widely accepted principles we're talking about here, called these three ways. Now that first way emphasizes the performance of the entire system, the systems thinking, as opposed to performance of a specific silo of work or a particular department. DevOps transcends departments and showcases the overall value to the customer. So development teams build and then ship to the operation teams, fortifying the customer value. And that first way is all about shifting our thinking to the entire system from the customer's perspective, instead of just thinking about singular goals of one team or one department. So in this line, some examples of systems thinking would be never passing a known defect downstream, or maybe being sure that anything you do to optimize locally doesn't end up creating global degradation, or just always seeking in everything you do to begin increasing flow between these teams. Now, the second way is around feedback loops. A quote from Gene Kim here, from the author of the Phoenix Project. The goal of almost any process improvement initiative is to shorten and amplify feedback loops so that necessary corrections can be made. So this is part of what the DevOps culture is all about. By improving feedback between development and operations and support and the customer, all of those teams end up understanding their impact to the overall goal. And that when that clarity and collaboration happens between teams, it breaks down barriers and improves productivity and decreases in conflict. So that when teams work together from the same feedback loop, communication breakdowns just end up becoming things of the past. And this third way is around continual experimentation and learning. So again, another quote here from Gene Kim. Creating a culture that fosters two things. We need continual experimentation, which requires taking risks and learning from successes and failures, and understanding that repetition and practice is the prerequisite to mastery. So this involves things like being sure to allocate time for experiments in what you're doing, or creating rituals that reward your team for risk-taking behaviors and their success. So how do we end up applying these DevOps principles to IT support? Well, fortunately, there was a framework called COMS, which was coined back in 2010, that includes a focus on culture and automation and lean and measurement and sharing. That they'll let us help us apply these principles to IT support. So the first one, the C in COMS, there is for culture. Now, culture is about daily or maybe weekly rituals that influence how your team works. So there's a focus on shifting from silos to constant communication. And DevOps is around that agility and a speed. So some of those rituals that you can apply to your support teams are things like daily stand-ups or hack days or chat rooms or maybe even retrospectives or sprint planning, the Kanban board framework or IM chat solutions that encourage collaboration. And then focus on results, not just all the activities. So obsessing on the number of changes isn't the point. What's important is focusing on those changes and measuring everything to determine the improvement on those measurements. And understanding behaviors, because culture is ultimately just really a collection and a result of habits. So you need to understand how your teams are working together so that you know what you need to improve on. So that A in COMS is for automation. Automation works when it supports people and processes that are already in place. You really can't automate something you can't do manually. So you need to begin to work to going from trapped knowledge to shared knowledge and begin to share known errors. And those known errors need to be tracked at the time of deployment and communicated up front to support, for example. And support should be linking back knowledge articles to incidents and problems so that everybody understands what's causing those incidents. And a shift from orphan tickets to link tickets so that all of your teams need to really be responsible for ticket linking and documentation, including the service desk, of course, but also administrators and developers and operations folks so that everybody knows what's going on. And then being sure to link incidents and problems to requests and changes to requests for changes and releases so that you can see the connections between them all. And then not just deploying and throwing it out there, but actually supporting it. So continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment are all core to that first way of thinking, where we're thinking about the performance of the overall system. So your team can be prepared to support and operate and ensure the ability to restore those services if needed. And they need to know what's being deployed and when, so that they can give the right answer to the customer at the right time. One example of this might be using the ITIL forward schedule of changes construct to keep people in the loop. And then helping with testing. So automated testing, of course, is key to any DevOps environment. But on top of that, IT support teams hold data around various customer environments that they're probably more familiar with because they're seeing it on the front line that should be fed back to testing. So that because of that firsthand knowledge that the support folks have around the customer environments can be really helpful to the testing folks. And keeping up with monitored data. So support needs to know about any proactive monitoring, but also to be part of the folks who provide the requirements for that monitoring up front. So that we can begin linking events that happen in our environment back to incidents and problems and changes again to be able to share that knowledge. Now the L in COMS is for lean. So lean, the lean structure here came out of the automotive manufacturing world. And it focuses on eliminating waste and always improving and understanding that failure is normal. So making your processes as simple as possible and looking at everything you're doing and determining what are you doing that doesn't add value and eliminating any duplicate work or unnecessary administration or that sort of thing. And then continuously striving for improvement there with IT support is about constantly iterating around your processes and services to deliver higher value services to the business. And of course, around failure, one principle of lean and the third way both is that if you're not failing, you're not getting stuff done. The what was learned really needs to be the most important thing that your team focuses on instead of what was happened or who did what. And creating a ritual of post-incident or post-mortem reports based on lessons learned around that can be shared across the teams are a good idea. So this is kind of like the sprint retrospectives from the agile software development practices that could be applied to support. The M in comms is for metrics. So the goal here is to keep track of only metrics that matter. I know that it's easy to begin grabbing data from everywhere and getting overwhelmed, but the key here is to just focus on what matters. So measuring your mean time to repair, whether it increases or decreases over time. Being sure that repetitive incidents are measured and determine how often they occur in a period so we can address them. Measuring service level targets against service level agreements and operational level agreements, but doing that in the context of deployments. And looking at what the impact of deployments are on achieving the overall goals. And then around costs, of course, what are your costs per incident, and what is the total cost of support? And sometimes you have to take into context with downtime costs that sometimes it's really better to increase support costs to be sure that you minimize impact to the business. And of course, the S in comms now is for sharing. So when it comes to sharing, you ask questions like, does the organization understand what we're doing, and do we all share that understanding? Are we all on the same page about that stuff? And do teams all understand each other's goals and hardships and priorities, or are we all sort of siloed? Do your team's process outputs flow into other teams' processes? How well are those processes coordinated together? And what is your team? Is all the knowledge that your team has being shared with others? And if it's in a system, can other people get to it, or is it a siloed thing where only your team is able to see that information? And how is your team collaborating with others? Are there unbarred channels for communicating, or are some layers of management or something getting in the way? And are the right stakeholders being kept in the loop? Even if those stakeholders aren't actually in your immediate group, are they still being kept in the loop on what's going on? And do your IT groups, such as development and operations and testing and support and even the business itself, do they share ownership not only of successes but of failures and all the learning that came from that? And then, the teams, are they sharing tools? Are we in separate tools that don't integrate together? Or are we able to share information? Maybe we're in the same tool, maybe we're not, but maybe we could be integrated. So how do we define success? Well, I think success is really effective processes, not just efficient ones. So we need visions and goals that are linked to business outcomes to provide innovation. And we need categorizations and tools that enable collaboration. We have to ensure that those tools work together. And getting the development folks and the IT support folks on the same platform is a great way to enable that kind of sharing. And then around process, needing to realize that incidents and problems and changes are really part of an IT backlog. So what we end up deciding to fix, or maybe even not to fix, is really based on the organization's needs. And continually improving service design and transition and operations. So what are the critical success factors really for applying these DevOps principles to IT support? Well, it's important for all teams to understand everybody's goals and to agree to the same set of goals up front. Everybody needs to agree to timelines and objectives, and everyone should participate in setting those. We all need to be sure to use a common vocabulary and be doing things the same way, so we're experiencing the same culture. We need to be applying learning to people and processes and automation, and we should be ensuring that our goals are set on outcomes that are measured and then measuring against those goals. And what kind of metrics do we need? And we want to reinforce behaviors, good ones, and recognize teams as a way of reinforcing good behaviors. And a lot of the tools support things like gamification today, which is a great way to get your teams involved in that sort of thing. So, like Dick mentioned earlier, RightStar is an Atlassian Gold solution partner. Atlassian's the solution vendor who provides a DevOps-focused platform, which joins both ALM, the DevOps stuff, and the ITSM, ITIL stuff together with products such as Jira Software and Jira Service Desk and Confluence and Bitbucket and Bamboo. And I wanted to just take a minute to share a couple success stories with their solutions around how companies used Atlassian to succeed in applying these DevOps principles to support. And both of these examples here have brought their development and teams and support teams together using the Atlassian or the Jira platform. The first one I wanted to talk about is the Puppet Labs, which has shown improvement by resolving tickets 67% faster. Now, Puppet Labs was a small startup which turned into a venture-backed capital with venture-backed company that has 300 employees or so. And when all that initial growth occurred, they found themselves at a real crossroads and needing to scale up quickly to for support channels while maintaining their service levels and this big builder of IT automation support software. Which provides both on-premise and in the cloud things, decided to turn to Atlassian's Jira Service Desk for help on that. The Puppet Labs manager, Nick Cunningham, noted that since they deployed Jira Service Desk, they've had resolution on tickets almost 67% better, which is a sign, of course, that their help desk team is able to actually get more work done. So today, all 300 of those employees at Puppet Labs are supported by Service Desk. And Mr. Cunningham noted that the Jira Service Desk with the entire Atlassian stack has been able to increase user adoption by letting folks stay in the same system and streamlining the maintenance process and reducing their total costs and labor for maintaining those systems. So with those Atlassian solutions, Puppet Labs was able to streamline their workflows and add critical efficiencies and really provide the help that their customers needed quickly. The second story I wanted to share here is around Skyscanner. Millions of people book trips using Skyscanner's global search engine every day, and given that they have thousands of those search engines going on every second, it's really no surprise that any defects in their software they have to take really seriously. So to help with their defect reporting processes as they come in, they needed a new kind of service desk to help them. Michael Hall, their business tools lead, said that they're building better software by fixing bugs twice as fast now since implementing Jira Service Desk. So today there are 700 employees over 9 global offices are helping improve their global search engine using Jira Service Desk. And he also noted that their end user customers actually get email updates now from the system so that they know exactly when problems are fixed and they can help understand the impact on product improvement. So again, here with the Atlassian solution, Skyscanner was able to really focus on individuals and interactions and not be limited by the tool set. So in conclusion here, faster, better service is around culture and sharing in tools that enable your teams. A collaborative culture is really ultimately the key to your success in DevOps and applying it to IT support. And by aligning support and development, you can help your organization begin to understand what services the business wants and really needs to be productive. So what's our takeaway from today? Well, first, start using those DevOps principles for IT support processes. You can start today by beginning to apply the principles of the 3 ways of DevOps or those CALMS principles to your IT support group. Secondly, begin to emphasize teamwork and collaboration to get those dev folks and those ops folks under the same roof by focusing on culture, by emphasizing collaboration through training and incentives and maybe simulation training and things like that. And metrics by measuring everything and maybe even consider benchmark studies to begin with. And consolidating the moving disparate dev and ops support systems, out from separate places and into each other or integrating them with each other. So that's what I wanted to share today. Dick, let's see, do we have any questions that have come in?
Alan, well, thank you. Great job. And now would be an excellent time to submit a question. Again, there's a Q&A box, and so just go ahead and type a question in, and we'll get to it. In the meantime, I have a couple of things I wanted to talk a little bit about, and we can form some of these in terms of questions. But the first thing I wanted to point out is that a lot of you out there, if you're familiar with ITIL, have realized that there's now this thing called ITIL v4, and the first training classes were just announced actually this month, and then you can actually sign up. I think some of the very early training classes will start at the end of this month. In fact, we've signed up for a Train the Trainer class, and so we hope to be offering some IDLE v4 training classes. I think you may be thinking, well, IDLE, what's new with IDLE? And I think IDLE has learned a lot over the past 10 years or so, and they're learning a lot from DevOps. And IDLE v4 is kind of another word for agile IDLE. And so I think it's learned a lot really from the DevOps here, because IDLE's reputation has been it's kind of a slower, more deliberate, we'll get there when we get there kind of approach. And agile is just the opposite. It's, what can we do to get there as quickly as we can and obtain the best possible results. So there's a couple of things that I've noticed in going around and talking to some of our customers. What are you doing on the service desk? How are you trying to continually improve? What are your takeaways? And one of the things that I hear a lot about is chat, and well, maybe a little bit on the chatbots, and we've done some work with chatbots, but I think a lot of our customers are looking to, what can we do to get started just with chat? And so Alan, one question for you would be, you're familiar obviously with HipChat and some of the other chat tools like Slack that are out there. What's the big deal about chat, and why wouldn't somebody just be happy with email? And should we all be using some sort of chat tool now? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think ultimately we're never going to be able to replace email. So folks there's going to be some stuff that'll have to be done that way. However, that is kind of a clunky way to be attacking a problem together. So often those chat tools are added to that support process or even that dev process to give folks a way to collaborate quickly. So Atlassian, for example, has recently announced a strategic partnership with Slack, which provides some integration to to Jira and Confluence to allow folks, maybe in a situation where a single topic spans multiple records, multiple issues in the system. Maybe it's 10 incidents that created a problem, which now has a development request to have a problem permanently fixed, which will then result in a change request to have it moved to production or a release request or something. All those different records in the system can have comments on them, for example, where folks could chat in line on that individual issue or individual record. But a chat solution provides you a place to chat in one place about a single topic, even when it spans multiple records. So that's one of the most useful places for it, as well as just having the rapid nature of chat. When an issue comes in, to be able to have folks swarm an issue and kill it that way quickly with a chat solution.
Okay. All right. The other thing that I'd like to do is talk a little bit about some of these other things that the customers are asking us about, and one of them is reporting, and I think you clearly pointed out that metrics is a very important thing. So is there any other thing that you can comment about reporting then, based upon your experience with tools like Atlassian or Jira or Remedy or some of these other tools that you've used before? Is that something that customers will typically, we'll get there when we get there, or should it become a bigger deal than it has been?
I find that many times reporting is an afterthought, and ideally it should be the first thought. So I find that a lot when we're designing systems, we go ask people how they want to key things and where they get data from to begin with, and then we store it all, and then we say, okay, executives or management or team leads, now how are you going to get what you need out of all this data? When maybe what we should be doing is saying, what data do we need to manage our business, and then designing a system to collect that. And often we find in that process that maybe we're tracking things we don't need to be tracking, so we're storing data we don't need and forcing people to enter data into the system and take up time doing that, or vice versa, where there's some key data missing here that we didn't even think to collect or wouldn't have if we hadn't designed that reporting up front. So one of the I think a more modern approach to things is to begin to focus on that reporting from the get-go.
Okay. Here's a question that's in, and it says, could you provide an example of how a traditional idle service desk and a DevOps service desk would handle an IT issue differently?
I'm not sure if the handling of the issue would be different. I mean, ultimately, a service desk, I think, would handle an issue the same way. It's just in a DevOps environment, that support team would have open channels to the dev folks and would be in the loop about anything that dev knew about up front, about problems that their new update might cause or when it was coming or those sorts of things, so that they're more enabled to handle those things when they happen. And they would have a rich a source of knowledge of all these things available to them. But, how they actually intake and work a ticket probably isn't all that different. Although I have seen some service desk teams which begin to work instead of from maybe more traditional queues, some that are maybe geared more towards supporting application development, that sort of support as opposed to just internal employee IT support, desktop, that kind of thing, have moved or are moving to using boards of some sort to represent their work and to be able to take an instant glance and see where things are on a board perspective on critical customer issues.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. And one of the things that I learned just recently, I was talking to a customer and we were talking about knowledge management, and he said, we use SharePoint, and he said, it's like, finding a needle in a forest. And I think that with Jira Service Desk as an example, there's this thing called Confluence. And I know that Confluence makes it much easier to tie, incidents to specific problems or assets, and also to look up information more efficiently. Is that kind of your experience as well?
Yeah, Confluence can provide a lot of stuff, but one of the keys that it provides from a service desk perspective would be that knowledge base where maybe you could provide rich text or graphic or even video-rich knowledge-based articles that folks could review in the service desk customer portal to maybe help themselves that way. As well as the ability to do some calendaring and looking at, the ITIL forward schedule of changes could be supported by Confluence, as well as the idea of retrospectives around, any sort of post-mortem kind of thing could be documented there and related to any issue as needed. So it provides a whole level of collaboration among those issues that's really helpful.
Okay. The other observation that I have is that when it comes to being efficient on a service desk, it's all about shifting left. In other words, you want to try to reduce the number of L1 calls that the service desk receives. However, I think you have to be a little bit careful about that because in particular, I work with somebody and she refuses to call an 800 number, or really just any number. She wants to research. She wants to find the information herself. And for me, I'm older. I just want to pick up the phone and call somebody because odds are they're going to know exactly what I'm asking about, and they're going to be able to answer my problem pretty quickly. But in her case, I guess on the one hand it's good because we're shifting left because that call's not hitting the help desk. Instead, she's doing all the research and looking things up and Googling everything and printing things out and highlighting and everything else. But just think of the time, and from my perspective, just think of the time that takes for somebody to do that when you can pick up the phone and get your answer. And I guess if you had a knowledge base that was a little bit more accurate, you could help solve that issue as well. So it wouldn't matter if you called or if you used a self-service portal. Is that kind of your experience too?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'd say that's spot on.
Yeah. Okay. Because that's just something that it just kind of bugs me, and I think that it's all about call reduction and shifting left, but you got to be careful how you do that. You can't just say, okay, here's Google, go find your own answers and then call us if you really need us, because that's not always the right thing to do. Okay. And then I had one other question I just wanted to run by you, because now you've had a significant amount of experience with both Remedy and I shouldn't say Remedy, but just enterprise service desk, which Remedy or ServiceNow would be considered, and then you have Jira Service Desk, which although Jira Service Desk certainly scales up to support very large enterprises, it's not priced in the same way that an enterprise package like Remedy or ServiceNow might be priced. In fact, it could be 10 times less expensive. But I think that, Alan, you would certainly agree that even though, Jira may be 10 times less expensive, it's certainly not 10 times less functional, right?
No, no, not
Yeah.
at all. I like to say that it's a whole lot of value in an inexpensive offering. Atlassian has a lot of ways that they keep their prices and cost on that kind of thing low, but one of them is that they funnel 70% of their profits back into R&D, and rely on companies like us to provide sales and support stuff, which lets them really be productive on that end.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it seems to me like Atlassian or Jira Service Desk is an extremely good value, and it's really only going to be a matter of time. Cost is important. It's not important to everybody, but I think it's important to a lot of organizations. And if they're going to look at the value received versus the value that, or the amount of money that you paid for something, then I think that you're going to see that, more and more that Jira Service Desk is looking like a very good deal, certainly compared to what you get. And certainly if you want to run IT the DevOps way, and, through the culture, automation, lean metrics, and sharing that you described. So I think that's certainly, they're really onto something, and maybe that's one of the reasons why they're such a fast-growing company, and they've already, I think, hit about $1 billion in software sales. So, good for them. So
it's inexpensive for any regular customer, but Atlassian also has a couple community licensing programs which allow educational folks a half-price discount on that, and nonprofits, qualifying nonprofits, actually get the software for free. So for some institutions, that becomes an even better value.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions out there, so I really thank you all for attending. Thank you for the questions. Thank you, Alan, for a great job today. And as you can see, there's a way to contact RightStar here. Either hit our website, or you can certainly call us or send us an email, and we'd love to set up a private discussion with you. Maybe it is around an assessment. Maybe you're trying to figure out, should I do an idle assessment? Should I do a DevOps assessment? What kind of advisory services should I need? How can I get to where I really need to be? And that's something that we'd really be delighted to talk to you all about. So certainly don't hesitate to call us about that. And